half an hour. They said it was half an hour, but it turned off 5 minutes later, so it wasn't half an hour. There we go. Where were we?
Never mind. Start again.
Okay.
Okay, so that phrase, never mind, start again, is that point when we have the job to do of changing the attitude, because the normal attitude is we're not going to like what we see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that when we first start going barefoot, we're not going to like what we're stepping in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we're practicing mindfulness, and the job now is to keep the mind at least on the breath, and when we recognize that the mind goes away from the breath, we don't like it. Now, here's the point. We don't even know how long it has wandered away from the breath. If it had wandered away from the breath, it might have been now 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And now I finally remember. Or it might be 3 or 5 minutes. And
It's
so
like it's like the first time I went walking barefoot in the bush. Well, not the first time I went walking barefoot in the bush, but when I went walking barefoot in the bush one time, I stepped in cow dung, and I thought, "Oh shit!" But then I realized, "Oh, this is actually sort of nice to squish your foot around in." And then I wandered around the bush, finding cow dung and stepping in it for the whole afternoon. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to never mind, start again.
Yeah.
But that's a good example of it right there. Of saying we don't have to not like what we just saw.
Mm-hmm.
That we can change our way of doing it. This is where the Eightfold Noble Path actually comes into play. And that is that sati was the recognition that the mind had wandered away. That the original intention was, or the original view was, that we're going to watch the breath. And now we recognize that the mind has wandered away. So that's sati, that's the wake up. This is the practice that we want to happen earlier and earlier so that it doesn't take 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That in fact, it's well known that by day 6, that the students are going kind of stir crazy because they are getting in touch with how much of a monkey mind that they actually have. See, in the first day, they can catch the mind wandering away 2, 3, 4, 5 times in an hour. On day 6, they're catching it 40 or 50 times in an hour. What does that mean? It means sati is getting very good.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of recognizing that this is the skill that's being developed and see the value of it, if you don't mind, Matt is asking to call. Can we add him in?
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay, let's see who that is.
Good morning.
Hello, we're already on a call. This is Jacob.
Hello, Matt.
Hi, Jacob. How's it going?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Yourself?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, I'm good.
So we were just talking about the Dhamma and the basics. So this is actually always a very good review.
Yeah.
Is in the point of ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, but first it pisses you off. That can be done in many ways because we're beginning to practice mindfulness. We're beginning to practice sati, or to look at really what's going on, or to wake up to it. And people in the beginning, they don't like it. They don't like what they see. So when Goenka says, when the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again, that never mind is, in fact, packed with the Eightfold Noble Path. And that is that one's right sati is what woke us up. And that the skill is that we wake up more and more often. And so then one's right effort comes into play, because one's wrong effort is going to be to hate it. And it really does take a lot of work to hate something. It's going to piss them off. Monkey mind, they call it. And they get agitated because they don't feel settled down, because they're not recognizing that sati itself is what's developing. So in a way, we need to congratulate ourselves. And this, when I say need, I'm talking about step 10 of Anapanasati. The skill to be developed is referenced as gladdening the mind. So as we wake up, then we gladden the mind, which means we've got to pull ourselves out of, I don't like what I just saw. I don't like that cow packet or that sharp rock I just stepped on barefoot. In other words, I'm taking the shoes off and going barefoot by actually looking at what the mind is doing, and I'm going to start seeing a lot of stuff that I don't like. That's the whole point of it, is that we're going to begin to see a whole bunch of stuff in the mind we don't like. Mm-hmm. Bad mind. And one of the first things we see is that the mind doesn't stay on the breath. It wanders off. Where does it wander off to? Wherever it is, that eventually when you catch it there, you're not going to like where it is. In the beginning, just that it wandered off, that's enough to start being unhappy about. And the more we see, the more opportunity we have then to practice this gladdening the mind, which is taking on the right effort. One's right effort is to say, aha, I see you. Mm-hmm. That we separate ourselves from it in the sense that these are constituent components of the mind, and that the mind that's wandering around is not you. The you are the one, at least, is the one who sees it. And then that gives into bad feeling. And now I feel bad about what the mind was doing a moment ago. Well, we do that a lot in normal life anyway. This is what Christianity basically is all about. Is that they set this very high standard and nobody can meet it, so all they can do is go around and feel guilty for having failed. All right? This is not the practice of the Buddha, is to feel bad and feel guilty about the fact that the mind wanders away, or that it wanders away into some pretty yucky stuff. Our job is always, when we find it wandering away, never mind where it's gone to, start again. Mm-hmm. Come back and start again. And so that starting again is one's right effort when it's gladdened, when we gladden the mind. And I use the phrase, caught ya, with that laugh of, oh yeah, I see that yucky stuff and I'm coming out of it. So the joy then is the coming out of it, because the only option is to not see it, not know it, be in it, be affected by it, and being in suffering. And so we wake up and then we say, I'm coming out of that stuff. I caught you. In fact, the Burmese are the ones who were really big on this point, and that is that the mind is linear in the sense that there's only room for one thought at a time. That, in a way, is true, but in a way, it's not. An example of it like that is that, yes, the main processor on the PC is step-by-step sequential, but it's got a lot of help from a lot of other different kinds of hardware in there, including the hard drives, the memory system, the screen itself, the user interface, all of that combines together. But that the processor itself, for instance, will send stuff to the graphic processor, or it can send stuff to the audio processor in one instruction and then continue along and let that particular hardware device go off and do its own thing. In many cases, walking for the human being is like that it doesn't take any thought to walk.
Because so basically that linear system doesn't account for the subconscious, really.
Right, exactly. That's another way, except that what this whole point that we're doing is that we're bringing the subconscious up to conscious level. That there is no such thing as the boundary between conscious and subconscious. It's only a matter of what we're paying attention to. And now we're beginning to pay attention to brand new stuff that we've never been told to pay attention to before. And so in the beginning, we're just looking at trying to get the mind off of the get off of whatever gutter it's in, and bring it back to the breath, and do so with gladdening, so that we begin to practice that gladdening, even throughout the day with every task, to gladden the mind, to bring it up, to let it be bright. And that and we do that with affirmations. We can do that with the joy of seeing what's going on, the recognition. In fact, at the beginning of this this video, right before that, the last thing that happened on the video before this one, that Jacob and I were on together, I had said the word, the reaction. And in my mind, I saw a reaction. And that's instantly when he saw that his battery on his laptop had run out. But it stayed on long enough for him to have this enormous reaction, which is exactly what I was talking about. And I saw that.
I didn't realize that.
I know you missed it. But I was laughing here for about 3 minutes. That was so funny. I mean, because we've already had our serendipity today. So that was another point of serendipity. It's really amazing how things are so connected. It's unbelievable, and it's just so hilarious when you see it like that. But you have to look, because most of the things that happen with synchronicity or serendipity, people miss them. And that was one of them.
Sometimes you don't realize, then it becomes apparent later on.
So, yeah, right. Seeing it in advance or while it's happening, that's the part that is so hilarious. Being able to put it together a minute later, like I did for you, has its value. But seeing it directly, that's the joy that comes from the gladdening of the mind that the mind has wandered away. And in the beginning, it's just merely wandering away from the breath. Eventually, it becomes wandering out of the wholesome world into the past, into the future, into places that is dangerous territory. And normally, we just let the mind go. Well, now we're going to start putting restraint on it. So the middle part of the path is that we're going to keep the mind in wholesome states. We're not going to let the mind wander away. We're going to keep the mind. And so you will ask the question, well, what is wholesome thoughts? The answer is that's the development of your own wisdom, is to come to the conclusion of what is it that's worth thinking about and what isn't that's not. And do it in the way that helps develop the skill. Because as you keep investigating this, you will raise the standard so that things that you used to allow yourselves to think about, you'll decide now I'm not going to let that happen anymore also. And part of the guarding the mind, here's an example, is that the old man had been going to this temple. He was ordained as a young man there. He intends to ordain again in his old age, but he's been part of the caretaker and the custodian and developed and devoted his time to this temple. He's well known there. Okay, so this is the setting. He's kind of like the treasurer of the big temple. All right, there's a new monk that comes on, and the new monk then gets into a squabble with this old man about something that happened in the temple. And so now the old man comes home and he makes his own mind up is that because he's been practicing Anapanasati, I will not think about the temple at all. Every time I think about the temple, I'll think about that monk. And when I think about that monk, I'll get unhappy again, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to take that whole temple out. Anytime that anything or any thought, or even just the colors gold and red come up, that's enough, and out it goes. Because it's so you begin to close a door. So he closed a door to a good part of his entire life. And so this is the way that it goes, is that we begin to recognize that an entire part of our life needs to be let go of, and so we'll close the door on it. Let that thing heal. Now, the end of the story about what did he ever go back to the temple, that's irrelevant. What we're talking about now is to be able to guard the mind so that certain topics are not available. An example of that would be while you're sitting in formal meditation, any thoughts about your job are to be grabbed immediately and thrown out. Unwelcome guest. Close that door. And we begin then to compartmentalize that under this label of, number one, learning to control our mind, because this is something that's so surprising for most people, is that eventually you can think the thoughts you want to think, and you will not think the thoughts that you don't want to think. And everything is preceded with this mind. This feeling thought complex is the seed that starts every event. The Brahmins taught differently. They said that doing an action, a harmful action, like harming someone or stealing from them or something, was a big, big deal. But and that was like chiseling a line in stone. And that lying or telling a falsehood with the mouth was more like drawing a line in the sand, that it was not so severe. And that a thought was like drawing a line in the air and had no weight or value at all. And the Buddha says, oh, no, no. The mind precedes everything. You've probably heard that, haven't you? Yeah. The mind precedes everything. Well, if that's true, then that means that we should develop the right view that the mind then can be guided so that it only has contents in it that we value, rather than just letting the mind do whatever is been doing. And we can train the mind to do things. We've trained the mind to read. You can use a laptop. We can control a car. We can control other people. But we've never been taught to control our own mind. And that's what this whole practice is about. The whole Dhamma is about getting the mind cleaned up. How clean? As clean as you want it. But keep investigating, because you'll keep demanding more of it, and then it's eventually going to come to a place that is completely satisfactory, because that's what you've been practicing all along. But in the process of that becoming more, developing the skills of being satisfied, also the standards keep going up higher and higher.
You said the word investigate there. That example that you gave about this man at the temple, so the way he dealt with it in the story is he just decided that he wasn't going to allow his mind to settle on that idea, and because he knew that the associations would lead him to a state of suffering. But is there not room to approach that a slightly different way, in a slightly more investigative way? So say he's sitting and he's just thinking, or say he's in formal meditation and that thought comes up, but there's enough kind of mindfulness and awareness and space within his mind at that moment to start to actually kind of see the chains that kind of cause that situation to make him suffer. Like, that is there room for perhaps like a slightly more inclusive investigation?
I would actually go so far as to say, congratulations. I had skipped over that portion. I went directly from investigation or recognizing it, and that what you're talking about is actually the process of recognizing that as harmful. And so once we recognize something, that sequence of events then can be short-circuited very early. Kind of thinking about it in the way of putting a stopper in a drain, that ordinarily the drain is circling, and anything that comes within that area, that thing will get sucked right into it. So any thoughts he has about the temple eventually get sucked into that argument that he had with this monk. And he knows that because he keeps watching it, and he keeps seeing that sequence of events. And he recognizes that, no, better to give it no thought, to drop it out of the mind, and to guard against that. So now what we're talking about here again is in the moment. At a later time, you may want to loosen that boundary. Let's say that you got over it completely emotionally, or that you've actually made friends with that monk or something like that. So then you could naturally release that bondage that you had put on the mind as kind of a training tool. That these are training tools that we're talking about. We're talking about developing the mind so that you can have in that mind what you want to have in that mind. And that the way we do that is through the process of, through Paticca Samuppada, is saying, oh, when this happens, this I do, and then I feel that way, and then I get selfish about it, and then I'm suffering. And we see that over and over and over again, and then we can recognize, no, I'm not going to think about that. Don't have to. And one of them actually is old wounds.
Sometimes fresh ones as well.
Yeah, well, the reason that they're fresh is because there's habit of the old ones, and the old ones are old only because we keep pestering them. We don't let them die.
They're the hardest ones I find. This just now before I phoned you, I was sitting, and it's when those old wounds get picked fresh, and they're the stickiest things I find in my meditation practice at the moment. They can bring me right back down. It's interesting to the, what you were just talking about, right sati and right effort and come back to the breath. When one of those old wounds is fresh, my practice comes right back to that, because they're so sticky and you do keep getting drawn to them, and you go, no, this isn't making me happy. These circular thoughts are not helpful. And also they're centered around, you're right, like a wounded self. And actually, it's not helpful to look at the world from that place. So let it go, start again, come back to the breath.
All right. So the example that I gave of the old man in the temple is whatever old wound you're carrying.
Yeah.
And you can kind of use the concept of the visual image of the Thai temple. So whenever you think about that, you can say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to dwell on the past. It's basically what we're doing, repeating that. As you said, yes, it's very sticky. I like that. But you only know that because you've been investigating it. So you know how yucky and icky that thought system is. Well, most people get stuck in those thought systems and they don't have a clue, one, that they want out of them, and two, that they're even in them.
And then it's the observation that when you're stuck in that place, you don't act specifically, you don't act very skillfully, because you're not seeing very clearly, and you're stuck.
Yes. And so we can apply then, in that case, one of the woeful states that we're stuck in. We get, and in another way of looking at it, we become born as something other than the human being that we could be. Like a dumb animal that operates completely under instinct. Or when we get anxious, uptight, competitive, angry, those are the feelings that are associated with being in hell, that we just can't stand the situation. And oftentimes the situation that we just can't stand happened already, it's over. It's already done.
It's funny though that the habit patterns can be so strong. It can be such a strong act of will to let go of that suffering. It's just so weird, isn't it? It shouldn't take will to let go of something.
Yeah, this is one's right effort, is to stop it. To say, I see you. And you take a deep breath, maybe 2 or 3, and you let it go. And you say, I'm glad I don't have to step into that stuff anymore.
But it's strange though, isn't it? When everything's quite easy, it's so easy to stay with the breath and to let go of everything else. But when everything else is really hard and painful, then it's harder to let go of. It seems like so illogical. The painful, heavy, burny stuff, you should be easy to let go of, but instead it's the hardest.
Well, it's interesting like that. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, but first it'll piss you off and you fight with it.
Yeah.
And we don't want to let it go. But now that we're beginning to see the truth, the real wisdom is that stuff's not worthy of thinking about. And so we begin to then take the conscious effort. Keep pushing it out. And that when it gets really sticky, it'll come right back. And then you push it out again. Oh, I saw you again. An example would be writing an email to an enemy, or maybe somebody who's on a list and you're having an argument with them or something like that. And every time we think about that email, we say, nope, I'm not going to think about that email. I'm going to let that go. I don't have to answer that guy. Just forget about it. Leave it alone. And then I'll start talking to myself in that email again, saying, I'm going to get you. I'm going to prove I'm right and you're wrong. Nope. Stop. Be here now. You don't have to write that email in your mind anymore. Have you ever done that? Is that an example of something?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I went back through a few of those messages about a year ago and, sit there sort of shaking your head wondering what the hell you're on about.
So that's an example of it again. So that email then can be that temple for that old man. Nope, not going to think about it. Out of here. And so we begin then to exercise the mind. I mean, that stuff is pretty heavy to lift up and throw out. And then you do it again. Then you do it again. Then you think of it again. No, out you go. And every time we have to gladden the mind, because every time we're stuck in it again because we don't like it. We don't like what that guy said. He was wrong. And so that effort of that energy that we have to hold on to it has to at least be equaled by the amount of that right effort to let go of it. Perhaps a way of talking about it is on big cranes, they have a thing called a hook. But you also have on a knitting needle, they've got a hook on it. Okay. So let me see if I can hold my hand so that you guys can see. Okay, so you've got a hook here. If I've got something laying on there and it's holding it up, I've got to get it up this much higher to get it off the hook. That's one's right effort. Is that effort that it takes to raise that thing up high enough to get it off your hook so you can let go of it. And I often talk about that in the sense of, aha, caught you. That's the effort that it's going to take. The effort of taking that deep breath, that effort of letting go of that thing, knowing that your skill of developing that I can let go of it right now will be a really advantage to do that again a minute from now when it comes back. And so we keep practicing over and over again. This is kind of like the weightlifting of the mind to get it trained so that we can have only what the thoughts that we want to have in the mind can be there. Wholesome thoughts. And so this is the practice of the training and meditation, but it does tend to change one's whole life. Changes the way you think. And you're thinking now wisely because you're guarding and not allowing the mind to have the kinds of thoughts that are foolish, selfish, competitive, fearful. Any of those kinds of things now are associated with the thoughts. And when we see that, oh, if I start thinking about this, that, and the other, I'll begin to feel this, that, and the other. I'm not going to think about those things because I'm not going to allow myself those kinds of feelings to drag me out of the state of being satisfied that I'm in right now.
How about something like standing up for yourself? More like not like revenge, but in the moment. I've had at work, I've had stuff happen where a particular member of staff has gone about doing a few things over a couple shifts, and I think, yeah, no, I don't like this. They're being a bit of a bitch, and I have to sort of stand up for myself, and it stops. How about in those sort of situations? Like, because last week you spoke about like being a lion or something like that, and I thought about that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Being a lion can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Sometimes lions get fired. Sometimes lions are given hemlock to drink. Sometimes lions get nailed to a cross. There's all kinds of things that can happen when you stand up for yourself. However, I would recommend then that when you do stand up for yourself, you do it with wisdom. But ye shall know the truth. Well, who cares about the truth? Well, that's the whole point, in fact, of the Dhamma, in a way, of becoming dedicated to the truth. That we want to be real. We're finished with this magical existence and all of these bad feelings and things. That we want to live in a world of reality. And the world of reality is that we can get along with one another. That humans are really good at getting along with each other, but we've done an awful lot of killing.
Mm-hmm. So they talk about this passivity, this sort of passivity within Buddhism that I've come across. But you also, in relation to what I said before, it's like you don't want to just let people walk all over you, because I've been that person in the past. I just let people walk over me, be generally quite passive about it, and then just move on. But sometimes it gets to a point where it's to your own degradation.
Absolutely. I would say get out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay to be passive, but be a passive bystander. Don't be passive laying in the middle of the road while they're running over you.
Yeah.
Stand aside.
Yeah.
There's several different ways of doing that. As little as an attitude change. And the fact that you can recognize that perhaps this guy who is storming along or steaming along is because he's upset with something else. There is the what is called a pecking order. And the pecking order will go from the big boss doesn't like the stock, and so he yells at one of the general managers, who then yells later at one of the line managers, who then goes and yells at an employee, who then yells at the janitor, and then the janitor goes home and yells at his wife, and the wife yells at her kid, and the kid kicks the dog. That's a TA joke, by the way. And at some place along the line, somebody's got to bring a stop to that. And perhaps it's you, that you do not have to get in line in that processional of passing it down the line. You can literally come to that point of the buck stops here, and that's the lion. That the lion can take it. He may have to. You see, the rebel is the one who gets pissed off and stands up for himself and says the wrong thing, but the lion is the one who at least is standing up to him inside. Hello, kitty. You having a good day? Oh, it's cold, huh? Yeah, it's been a cold, rainy day, and no power. So, bombarded with input. We were talking about then being passive. the passivity, if the passivity is there, it should be there on the inside, in the sense that whatever is happening now, it's not happening to you.
Mm.
That you can handle it. That you're the lion here. And you don't have to stand up for yourself or compete with them, be competitive, in fact, or doing a power grab is often why people do get fired. And one of the most powerful things that somebody can do is, I quit. But that's only in the moment when we say that. So the important thing is to keep your wits about you when somebody is giving you a hard time. And the easiest thing to do would be to excuse yourself and take a hike. And there's many ways that you can do that. One of them would be simply, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom. And then you take off and just leave them.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually an easy way for a bully, like a kid at school, is to say, oh, I got to go. We'll see you guys later, and just walk off. Whichever way that they were walking to you from, that's the direction you go, so that they'll have to turn around and follow you if they want to harass you. This is all psychology, but it's many ways of handling things. So you can take a hike. That's one of them. Number two, you can stand there and take it like a man, because you're better than a man. You're a lion. You can handle this. And so those are two different options. The third option would be to do it with a smile. And you can actually thank them. And so if they're saying this, that, and the other about you, you can say, oh, well, thank you. I'm really glad to know that. I'm glad you told me. That'll really diffuse people mostly.
So I think when people are being aggressive to you, they're looking for a reaction, aren't they? And if you meet their aggression, if you dial down your sense of small s sort of egotistical self, they're not going to get the traction, and it's going to be pointless to them. So if you're looking back, smiling at them, basically, going, I don't, in a not aggressive way, you're saying, I don't care, this doesn't affect me, then that person feels silly trying to attack you, and the whole thing is diffused.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's that ego, it's that sense of self. If your sense of self is kind of there, feeling attacked and needing to attack back, then the situation is going to get worse. Whereas if you just somehow can let it dial down and not take it personally, then they're not going to get any traction in their attack, and the whole thing's, and they're going to give up. And
that's a very interesting phrase that you just used, taking it personally. There's only one way to do taking it personally, and that is taking it selfishly, or taking it with the self. The person is the self. So that's a really good way of talking about it. Don't take anything personally. And I know that it's easy when people say, well, don't take it personally. He says, what do you mean don't take it personally? He hit me. Yeah, well, you're taking it personally. He may have just been lashing out, and you just happen to have been there. And if you're not standing there when he lashes out, you're unlikely to get hit. Step aside. Take a hike. Walk away. These are the ways of handling it. Change the subject. For instance, if the bully comes up with another friend or two, then engage the other friend. And don't talk to the bully. These are all tricks, by the way. So change who you are, change your location, change the topic of conversation, change who you're talking to. All of these are various ways of changing the situation, because if you don't change it, then you'll be right back where you've always been, and that is the butt of somebody else's violence. Don't respond. You got it, huh?
Yeah.
Actually, it's a skill to be developed, and you probably will have ample opportunity to develop that skill. That, in fact, this happens to some people, but not others. But throughout my life, I have been in the situation of where people who I didn't really know or wasn't really closely involved with them would, for some reason or another, become jealous of me for some reason. And then their behavior started to change because of that. And many times when people are jealous of somebody else, they'll want to prove, well, I'm as good as he is, and so they start to compete. And this can grow over time, and it doesn't even matter what your social relationship with them is. In fact, it kind of happens with a boss, that if a boss gets a good employee, he will compete with that employee for his own emotional well-being, thinking that his job is on the line, where in fact he's actually, by behaving this way, putting his job on the line. We bring about that which we are afraid. So if you're not afraid of anything, you're not going to draw any bad crap. Isn't that amazing? Just don't be afraid of anything, and you got nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be afraid of. Almost all of our fears are manufactured from our own unresolved conflicts.
And sometimes the things we're scared of are actually the thing which will be the most positive thing in our life. You know, we're often scared of letting, I can't lose this job, or this relationship can't end, or you invest everything in this fear of something ending, and then it happens, and actually you have a period of a lot of growth and release and relief, and
you didn't have to go through any of that.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. And so in a way, then ultimately right effort becomes less and less effort. That in fact your whole life has very little effort left in it, because we worked at the right thing in the beginning. And that is to be able to shut that door, or to keep our mind away from certain topics. And you can decide which topics that you've got are not worth thinking about. For instance, times in your past when you've been bullied, or when people have walked all over you. Don't remember any of those things. Stop thinking about it. Stop rehearsing being stepped on. That those are not thoughts worthy of having. So here's a question then. Well, what kind of thoughts are worthy of having? Well, thoughts of friendship, thoughts of camaraderie, thoughts of jokes, thoughts of this present moment.
Yes, I was going to say, right, what's right in front of you.
Right, what's in front of you. Thoughts of what's in the here now. And so this is what happens in the middle of the practice. This is what we mean by being in the stream, because we're out there actively looking for unwholesome thoughts. That becomes the search for dukkha. The search for dukkha narrows down to what thoughts are I'm going to have that are worth having, and which thoughts are I'm going to have that are not going to be worth having much, and I'm going to would catch myself having those thoughts. I'm going to throw them out. And we do so with I caught you. You're not something I'm going to have in my mind. And so then the end practice, good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end of the practice is that when we have developed the habit of having wholesome thoughts, and now there's no more work to be done, that the job that needed to be done has been done. There's no more work, no more effort. The Buddha actually talks about that. He also uses the term pure as a polished shell, and in one sutta mentions the four things that are characteristic of letting go. One of them is called the cross, or what we would think about is like the hilt of a sword or a weapon. So we go around defenseless. We don't have any more weapons. That we drop our weapons. This is how open the lion is. The lion does not carry a sword. Does not carry weapons. And so we also come to the point that we don't even carry verbal weapons. So the next one is that we fill in the trench. Now, what we mean by the trench is basically the boundary. But you can think of the trench either as a moat around a castle or the trench for warfare, which is a boundary to slow the enemies down. In other words, the defensive systems that we put up. We begin to let those go. The third one,
like the boundary of the self, like we're drawing a line around ourselves, separating ourselves from everyone. This is myself, these are yourselves.
Right. But in this case, we're talking about it in the sense of the perimeter. Our territorial boundaries, our identifications of who we are, which really then fits in with the next one, and that is to give up the banner, to put down the banner. Now, what we mean by banner are an icon or a flag. The Romans, their legions would have banners so that the big general at the top of the hill could see who was doing what, because he would watch where the banners were. Okay, but we have many different IDs or banners. We associate with countries. We associate with political parties. We associate with religions. We associate with family systems. We associate with universities. We associate with sport teams. Many different kinds of associations, and every association we make, we're talking about mostly the big ones, well, the kind of thing that will have some sort of flag to it, or a symbol, or an icon. Something that we will hold, like, for instance, the donkey of the Democrat and the elephant of the Republican, or the United States flag, or the Australian flag, or a Christian flag, or a company logo. Anything like that would be the banner. And any banners that we hold, any attachments that we have, that means that we are subject to the ups and downs of that organization. So if the Democrats go up and I feel I'm a Democrat, then I go up. But when the Democrats go down, then I go down because I got to go with them because I'm a Democrat. Okay? But when we are no longer associated with the Democrats or the Republicans or any political party or any country for that matter, we begin to see things in a much broader context, because almost all of those flags has to do with what's happening in not the immediate moment, but in a large present moment like this year, or what's happening now between now and the election and that kind of stuff, rather than a long, expansive view, which shows things in huge, huge cycles. Some cycles last 50 years. An example of that 50-year cycle or so is the issue with racism. That it got really bad in the 1860s. Then it got really bad again in the 1920s. Then it got really bad again in the 1920s. And now it's getting really bad again in the 2000s. Isn't that interesting? About every 50 years, we have a racial crisis. And so seeing things in large contexts like that, we can get away from caring about what happens with politics this year. That we live a longer life cycle than that. So we're not concerned with what other people are concerned with. Whether Christianity lives or dies, whether Islam grows strong or goes weak. Not our concern. Our concern is maintain well-being and happiness and keep good thoughts in the mind. So we give up our banners. We're no longer associated with anything. That we go down to the 4 requisites. Just enough food, just enough clothing, just enough shelter, and just enough medication. That's what we got. When we got that, we're good to go. Political parties are not just optional, they're downright dangerous. And so then the last one, and that one is the unbolting of the door. This is when we really have the open heart. That, for instance, we keep our door bolted with fear because we do not want death to enter. Well, guess what? Death is going to enter whether we bolt the door or not. When death comes knocking, he's going to open that door whether it's bolted from the inside or not. And so we become defenseless completely. We don't even have the door bolted now. Okay, so the banner and the bolt and the trench and the weapon. These are the signs that when someone has given up these things, that they are at the end of the journey. This is now the end of the path. We don't need it much more. Now it's really good because I don't have anything that's weighing us down. This is real moksha, real freedom. Freedom from politics.
And it's deep no self, isn't it? All of those, I don't know, every single one of those 4 items you can think of as relating to the breaking down of that limiting self.
So, exactly. And the self is always to preserve the self. And if you feel safe that your self doesn't need any preservation at all, then we don't need the Democrats to save us. Or the Catholics or anybody else. They were good to go. We're not afraid. So that's when it's good in the end. So it's good in the beginning. I caught you. It's good in the middle in the sense of only wholesome thoughts. And it's good in the end. Wow, this is wonderful.
I'm going to say goodbye on that really lovely note, Dhammarato. So thank you very much for me piggyback on your call, Jacob.
All good. See you, Matt. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, Matt, we'll
Thank
talk
you
to
very
you
much,
later.
Dhammarato.
Do you have anything left?
I do have a couple questions actually.
Okay.
Do you have much time? Because I can just call tomorrow if you want.
Why don't we call it an end and you do call tomorrow? I would like that.
Yeah, sure
Because
thing.
we've been
All
in
right.
quite a while with
We,
these two calls.
we have been. It's almost 2 hours. Yeah. All right. I'll see you tomorrow, Dhammarato.
Okay. Well, I've
Have a
really
good one.
enjoyed this talk. This has been a good one.
It has been. See you.
Okay, see you. Bye-bye. Oh, you're still